Imagine this. You spent $500 on a pair of premium leather boots. To protect your investment, you picked up a $40 professional grade conditioner because, of course, only the best for your best. But here's the brutal irony nobody tells you at the counter. That conditioner might be the very thing slowly killing your leather. The global leather care market is worth over $5 billion and it's growing. Brands like Sapphire, Leather Honey, Bickmore, and Chamberlain's sit comfortably on shelves, charging $10 to $40 for a jar, small enough to fit in your palm. The margins are extraordinary. The ingredients, in many cases, are not. This is a market built not on leather science, but on consumer anxiety, the fear of ruining something expensive. And anxiety, as it turns out, is incredibly profitable. Here's what most commercial leather products actually do. They coat the surface, they deposit waxes, silicones, or synthetic polymers on top of the grain, creating a visual shine that reads as conditioning to the eye. Your leather looks nourished. But the internal fiber structure, the collagen network that gives leather its strength, flexibility, and longevity, receives nothing. Meanwhile, those same coating agents can block the pores, preventing the leather from breathing, trap moisture beneath the surface, accelerating microbial breakdown, create dependency. The leather looks dull the moment you stop applying product, so you keep buying. The leather isn't being fed, it's being painted over while it dries out from the inside. This is where it gets particularly sophisticated. Brands have mastered a set of trigger words that short-circuit rational evaluation. Heritage formula implies decades of craft tradition, often means an unchanged recipe from when ingredient costs were lower professional grade. The word professional adds perceived authority with zero regulatory meaning in this industry, museum quality, appeals to the preservation instinct, rarely backed by independent testing, deeply penetrating, almost impossible to verify at home and frequently untrue. The underlying ingredients in a $40 jar and a $4 drugstore alternative are often sourced from the same industrial suppliers. The difference lies in fragrance, packaging, and the psychological work done by the label. You're not paying for better chemistry, you're paying for better storytelling. Leather, at its core, is collagen protein, the same structural protein found in human skin, tendons, and bone. In a living animal, the hide is a dynamic, self-maintaining system. Sebaceous glands continuously secrete natural oils that lubricate the spaces between collagen fibers, allowing them to slide past one another without friction, keeping the skin supple, strong, and resistant to tearing. Think of it like a rope made of thousands of individual threads. When those threads are well lubricated, the rope bends easily without breaking. When they're dry, every bend causes fiber against fiber abrasion, and the rope slowly destroys itself from within. Tanning is the chemical process that transforms raw hide into leather, preventing decomposition and making it stable enough to last decades. It's a remarkable preservation achievement, but it comes at a cost. Whether through vegetable tannins, chrome salts, or aldehyde compounds, the tanning process strips the hide of nearly all its natural oils. The collagen structure is preserved, but the lubrication system is gone. What you're left with is an intricate fiber network with nothing between the fibers except air, and eventually friction. Every time you bend, fold, or flex leather after this point, those unlubricated fibers grind against each other at a microscopic level. Over months and years, they weaken, crack, and ultimately fail. This is why untreated leather doesn't just look bad with age. It structurally deteriorates. Here's the science the marketing copy carefully avoids mentioning. Most premium conditioners rely on one of two synthetic bases. Silicone compounds create a smooth, flexible-feeling coating on the surface. Petroleum derivatives, mineral oil, paraffin wax, add visible sheen and short-term pliability. The fundamental problem is molecular size and polarity. Collagen fibers have a specific molecular geometry, a triple helix protein structure with defined binding sites. Silicone molecules are too large and chemically inert to pass through the tightly packed grain layer of finished leather. Petroleum molecules are nonpolar, meaning they have no chemical affinity for the polar collagen protein beneath. The result? These ingredients penetrate only the top 20% of the leather's cross-section at best. They condition the surface you can see, while the deeper fiber structure, and where structural integrity actually lives, receives nothing. The leather feels soft when you press it, but the internal architecture continues to degrade. This is where the chemistry becomes genuinely interesting. Neatsfoot oil, rendered from the shin bones and feet of cattle, has been used on leather for centuries. For a long time, this was attributed to tradition or folk knowledge. The molecular explanation is more compelling. Neatsfoot oil is composed primarily of oleic acid, an 18-carbon monounsaturated fatty acid. This is chemically almost identical to the fatty acids that comprise the hide's original sebaceous secretions when the animal was alive. Because of this structural similarity, molecular size, Oleic acid molecules are small enough to pass through the grain layer and migrate into the deeper fiber structure. Chemical polarity: oleic acid is partially polar, giving it genuine affinity for the collagen protein chain bonding. Rather than sitting on top of the fiber surface, oleic acid forms weak but real chemical associations with the collagen, effectively recreating the lubrication layer that tanning removed. This is not surface treatment. This is restoration of the original lubrication architecture at a molecular level, something no synthetic compound currently replicates. The fibers can slide again, the leather can bend without grinding itself apart. And unlike silicone coatings, the effect doesn't wash or wear off the surface. It lives where it's needed, inside the structure itself. Long before the age of synthetic chemistry, before laboratory formulations and marketing departments, English cordwainers, the master leather workers of medieval Britain, had already solved the problem. The process was unglamorous by any standard. They took the shin bones and feet of oxen, boiled them slowly in large vats, and skimmed the rendered oil from the surface. The result was a pale yellow liquid they called neatsfoot oil, neat being the Old English word for cattle. What these craftsmen understood empirically, without any knowledge of molecular chemistry, was that this particular oil did something nothing else did. It went in, not just onto the leather, but into it. Boots treated with neatsfoot oil didn't just look better, they lasted longer, bent without cracking through hard winters, and resisted the kind of structural failure that made untreated leather a liability. This knowledge was considered valuable enough to be passed down through guild apprenticeships for generations. In a world where a craftsman's reputation was entirely tied to the longevity of his work, you didn't share your best methods casually. Neatsfoot oil was a trade secret for over 2 centuries. In July 1545, the English warship Mary Rose sank in the Solent during a battle with the French fleet. She took most of her crew with her and lay on the seabed for 437 years before being raised in 1982. Among the artifacts recovered from the wreck were leather items, shoes, scabbards, and personal effects belonging to the crew. What the conservation team at the Mary Rose Trust discovered was extraordinary. Several pieces of leather recovered from the wreck retained measurable flexibility. After nearly 4.5 centuries submerged in silt and seawater, leather that should have long since mineralized or disintegrated was still mechanically functional. Analysis of the surviving pieces indicated the presence of fatty acid compounds consistent with animal-based oil treatment applied before the ship sank. The water had preserved the anaerobic environment. The oil had preserved the collagen. Together, they produced one of the most remarkable unintentional leather preservation demonstrations in history, and a data point that no modern synthetic product can claim to match across any comparable time frame. By the 19th century, military organizations had learned through painful operational experience what medieval cobblers had known through craft tradition. Leather that isn't properly conditioned fails under stress, and in the field, that failure has consequences. The United States cavalry formalized this knowledge into regulation. Neatsfoot oil was listed as a required item in cavalry supply inventories, mandated for the maintenance of saddles, bridles, boot leather, cartridge pouches, and any other leather equipment carried by a soldier. The reasoning was entirely practical. A cracked saddle in the field meant a compromised rider. A failed boot meant a compromised soldier. The Army had calculated, through decades of operational experience across varying climates and terrain, that the cost of oil was negligible against the cost of equipment failure. The specification wasn't generic. It called for neatsfoot oil specifically, not tallow, not lard, not any of the other animal fats that were widely available and cheaper. The distinction had been earned through experience with what actually worked when leather was subjected to heat, cold water, and sustained mechanical stress. For those who require empirical confirmation over historical evidence, a 2016 study published in the Journal of Cultural Heritage provided it. Researchers tested the penetration depth of multiple leather conditioning compounds, including several contemporary premium commercial products, against traditional animal-based oils. Using cross-sectional analysis of treated leather samples, they measured how far each compound actually migrated into the leather's fiber structure. The findings were unambiguous. Modern synthetic conditioners, silicone and petroleum-based, penetrated an average of 15 or 20% of the leather's cross-sectional depth. Traditional animal-based fatty acid compounds, including neatsfoot oil, penetrated up to 5 times deeper into the same leather samples under identical conditions. The study was conducted in the context of museum conservation, institutions with a professional and legal obligation to make the correct choice, because the artifacts in their care cannot be replaced. Conservation scientists are not influenced by marketing budgets or brand loyalty. They needed to know what actually worked. Their conclusion aligned with what English cordwainers, naval outfitters, and cavalry quartermasters had already known for centuries. The oldest solution remains the most effective one. Let's start with the numbers that brands prefer you never think about. The active ingredients in most premium leather conditioners, the compounds that actually interact with leather at a functional level, are agricultural and industrial commodities. They are bought and sold in bulk on open markets, with publicly available pricing. There's nothing proprietary, rare, or difficult to source about them. Here's what the primary ingredients actually cost at industrial scale. Pure neat's foot oil, approximately $2.50 to $4 per liter beeswax. Cosmetic Tosh pharmaceutical grade, approximately $5 to $8 per kilogram. Lanolin, refined wool grease, approximately $3 to $6 per kilogram carnauba wax, approximately $6 to $10 per kilogram. A 200 milliliter jar of leather conditioner from a recognized brand retails between $15 and $40. The actual ingredient cost contained in that jar, the oil, the wax, the emulsifier, is typically between $1.40 and $1.80. The remaining $14 to $39 covers manufacturing overhead, fragrance, which does nothing for leather, graphic design, glass or embossed tin packaging, retail markup, distributor margin, and the brand's marketing budget, which is often the single largest line item of all. You are not paying a premium for better ingredients. You are paying a premium for the story told around identical ingredients. This is perhaps the most consequential piece of practical information in this entire series. Walk into any hardware store, farm supply shop, or equestrian retailer, and you will find bottles labeled neat's foot oil at very low prices, sometimes $4 to $6 for a large bottle. And standing next to them, you will often find bottles from the same or similar brands labeled neat's foot oil compound at a similar or slightly lower price. These are not the same product. The difference between them is not minor. It is, in fact, the difference between a product that restores leather and one that degrades it. Neat's foot oil compound is a diluted mixture in which a portion, sometimes the majority, of the neat's foot oil has been replaced with mineral oil, a petroleum derivative. Manufacturers do this because mineral oil is significantly cheaper than rendered animal oil, and because the resulting liquid looks and pours almost identically to pure neat's foot oil. The problem, as established in Part 2, is that mineral oil cannot penetrate past the surface grain layer due to molecular size and incompatible polarity, does not form any chemical association with collagen fibers, can accumulate as a residue that gradually interferes with the leather's ability to absorb genuine conditioning in future treatments, accelerates oxidative degradation of collagen over time with repeated application. The word compound is doing a great deal of work on that label, quietly signaling adulteration to anyone who knows to look for it, while appearing to most consumers as simply a product variant. The only label worth purchasing is 100% pure neat's foot oil. Not compound, not formula, not premium blend, pure. To understand how a commodity becomes a luxury product, it helps to trace the journey of a single hypothetical product from raw material to retail shelf. Stage 1, raw materials. $0.60 worth of neat's foot oil, beeswax, and emulsifier measured into a batch. Stage 2, manufacturing. Blended, heated, and filled into containers at a cost of approximately $0.80 per unit, including labor and energy at scale. Stage 3, packaging, an embossed tin or amber glass jar with a foil seal, designed to communicate heritage and quality, $1.20 to $2.50 per unit depending on material. Stage 4, fragrance and color, a small quantity of cedar or leather scent fragrance compound added, $0.15 per unit. This ingredient has zero functional effect on leather. It exists entirely to influence the sensory experience of the person opening the jar. Stage 5, branding and marketing. The brand invests significantly in photography, editorial content, retail placement fees, and influencer partnerships. These costs are amortized across units and can add $3 to $8 per jar at the unit economics level. Stage 6, distributor and retail margin, typically 40 to 60% of the final retail price. Final retail price, $35. At no point in this chain did the leather care efficacy of the product increase. What increased was the perceived value, engineered deliberately and at significant expense to justify a price point that the ingredient list cannot. The synthetic leather care industry carries an environmental burden that rarely enters the conversation at the point of sale. Silicone compounds are derived from silica through an energy-intensive industrial process involving hydrochloric acid. They are not biodegradable on any practical timescale. Silicone polymers persist in the environment for hundreds of years. When leather treated with silicone eventually reaches the end of its life and decomposes, those compounds enter the soil. Petroleum-based ingredients, mineral oil, paraffin wax, petroleum jelly, are non-renewable hydrocarbon derivatives. Their extraction and refinement carries the full environmental weight of fossil fuel processing. They are not biodegradable. Pure animal-based oils, by contrast, are derived as byproducts of existing livestock processing, no additional animal impact beyond what the meat industry already generates. are fully biodegradable, broken down by soil microorganisms into harmless fatty acids and glycerol. Require no petroleum extraction or industrial chemical processing. Extend leather's usable life significantly, which delays the energy cost of producing replacement goods. There is a useful irony here for the environmentally conscious consumer. The cheapest, oldest, least marketed option is also frequently the most sustainable one. The premium synthetic products, sold with the aesthetic vocabulary of quality and responsibility, carry a heavier environmental footprint than the $6 bottle of pure oil sitting next to them on the shelf. The most expensive conditioning routine in the world will underperform if it's applied to unprepared leather. This is not a minor procedural detail. It is the step that determines whether your conditioner reaches the collagen fibers or simply bonds to the layer of dirt, salt, and oxidized oil sitting on top of them. Leather accumulates several categories of surface contamination over time: body oils and sweat salts, which alter the surface pH and can accelerate collagen degradation; environmental particulate, dust, pollution, and fine grit that lodge in the grain and act as an abrasive with every flex residue from previous products; old wax, silicone buildup, and oxidized conditioning layers that have hardened on the surface. The critical requirement is a pH-neutral soap, specifically formulated for leather, or, at minimum, confirmed to be pH balanced between 6.5 and 7.5. The reason is chemical. Leather's collagen structure is stable within a specific pH range. Alkaline cleaners, which includes most household soaps, dish detergents, and many all-purpose cleaners, raise the surface pH in a way that causes the collagen to swell, weakening the fiber bonds. Acidic cleaners cause the opposite reaction, contracting and stiffening the fibers. A pH-neutral cleaner removes contamination without altering the chemical environment the conditioner will work in. The process: dampen a clean, lint-free cloth, not soaking wet, just visibly damp. Apply a small amount of pH-neutral leather soap and work into a light lather on the cloth, not directly on the leather. Clean in small circular sections, using minimal pressure. Follow immediately with a second damp cloth to remove soap residue. Allow the leather to dry completely at room temperature, never with a heat source, before proceeding to conditioning. Drying time matters. Conditioning leather that still holds moisture from cleaning traps that moisture inside the fiber structure once the oil creates its barrier. Patience here prevents mold, odor, and accelerated internal deterioration. The single most common application mistake is using too much product. And this applies whether you're using a $40 premium conditioner or $4 worth of pure neat's foot oil. More oil does not mean more conditioning. It means excess accumulation on the surface, clogged pores, and a tacky finish that attracts more dirt than untreated leather. The principle governing correct application is thin layers, full absorption, repeat if necessary. What you need: pure neat's foot oil, 100%, confirm the label. 2 clean cloths, 1 for application, 1 for buffing. Natural light or a good lamp to see surface sheen. The process: step 1, warm the oil slightly. Place the bottle in warm, not hot water for 5 minutes. Slightly warmed oil has lower viscosity and penetrates the grain layer more readily. This is a small difference that compounds over many treatments. Step 2, apply sparingly to the cloth, not the leather. A 5-cent piece sized amount for a standard boot. You can always add more. You cannot easily remove excess once it's worked into the surface. Step 3, work in small sections, using circular motions. This mechanical action opens the grain slightly and drives the oil into the surface rather than simply depositing it on top. Cover the entire surface systematically. Step 4, give deliberate attention to the seams. Stitching lines are stress concentration points. The leather flexes most sharply here. And this is where fiber breakdown typically initiates. Work the oil into the seam channels directly, using a fingertip or a soft brush if necessary to reach the depth of the groove. Step 5, apply along flex lines. On boots, this is the ball of foot crease. On bags, it's the fold at the top of the gusset. On belts, it's every hole in the primary buckle flex point. These areas receive the most mechanical stress and deplete their conditioning fastest. Step 6, wait. This is the step that requires the most discipline and delivers the most return. Set the item aside for a minimum of 4 hours. Overnight is better. The oil needs time to migrate through the grain layer into the deeper fiber structure. Buffing immediately removes what you just applied. Step 7, buff with a clean, dry cloth. Light circular pressure removes surface excess and raises a natural, non-greasy sheen. If the leather still feels tacky after buffing, it received too much oil. Noted for next time. This is the formulation that professional saddlers, military bootmakers, and museum conservators have used in various versions for over a century. It requires 2 ingredients and approximately 10 minutes. Ingredients: pure neat's foot oil. 100% natural beeswax, available from beekeeping suppliers, craft stores, or bulk food retailers. The ratio, roughly 70% neat's foot oil to 30% beeswax by volume. This can be adjusted. More wax increases water resistance and surface hardness. More oil increases penetration depth and softness. For heavy weather boots, shift toward 60-40. For fine dress leather, stay at 75-25. Preparation. Place beeswax in a small glass jar or metal tin. Set the jar in a pot of hot water. Double boiler method. Never apply direct heat to wax. Once the wax melts completely, add the neat's foot oil and stir until fully combined. Remove from heat and allow to cool undisturbed until it solidifies into a soft balm. The result is a conditioning wax that accomplishes what no single ingredient product can fully replicate. The neat's foot oil penetrates the grain layer and conditions the internal fiber structure. The beeswax remains closer to the surface, filling the microscopic pores of the grain with a hydrophobic barrier that repels water without blocking gas exchange. Commercial products marketed as conditioning waterproofers do exactly this, with the addition of synthetic emulsifiers, petroleum fillers, and a retail markup of 800 to 500%. The homemade version contains nothing they don't, and omits everything that provides no benefit to the leather. The material cost for enough balm to treat a pair of boots 10 times over, approximately $2 over. At the Bata Shoe Museum in Toronto, one of the world's most significant collections of footwear history, there's a pair of boots dated to approximately 1780. They are not behind glass because they are too fragile to handle. They are behind glass because they are museum artifacts, but the assessment of the conservation staff is consistent and remarkable. These boots retain sufficient structural integrity that they could, theoretically, still be worn 240 years after they were made, decades before Canada existed as a country, made during the lifetime of George Washington. The leather has not cracked. The fiber structure has not catastrophically degraded. The seams have held. The analysis of these and similar historically preserved leather pieces consistently identifies one common factor in their survival: continuous, correct maintenance using animal-based oils, applied by owners who understood that leather is a biological material requiring ongoing care rather than a finished product that maintains itself. The boots that did not survive, and the majority from that era did not, were the ones stored dry, treated with incompatible compounds, or simply neglected. They became brittle, cracked along the flex lines, and eventually powdered. The difference between a museum piece and landfill was not the quality of the leather at manufacture. It was what was done to it afterward. This is the investment case for understanding leather care at a level deeper than marketing allows. A $300 pair of leather boots, properly maintained with $6 worth of pure neat's foot oil applied correctly twice a year, can last 30 to 40 years with genuine structural integrity. Improperly maintained, the same boots may show serious deterioration within 5 to 7 years, regardless of what expensive products were used on them. The 240-year boots in Toronto are not a miracle. They are the logical outcome of doing the right things consistently, with the right materials, for a very long time.